service it.
No, we'll be done before then, John.
Yeah, sure, Greg.
Hi, Erica.
Hi.
Hey, Rob.
Hi. Good evening, everybody. I'm not an AC, so if you see me do this, it's for survival reasons.
He's honoring the peak. He is honoring the peak.
I am shaving the peak. Okay.
I do have a member of the public in the waiting room, so just let me know when I should let him in.
Yep, go right ahead, please.
I just popped out. 1 second.
Okay, and sorry for the pause here. And Jason, I'll allow you to bring the cab meeting to order, unless we're waiting for anybody else in the cab.
No, I think everybody's here.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
This time I'm going to call the Citizens Advisory Board to order. I think we have to because it's remote. We'll all have to state our name and that we're present. Jason Small, aye.
Dennis Kelly, aye. Vivek Soni, aye.
Okay, the Citizens Advisory Board meeting is started.
Okay. So this meeting of the Reading Municipal Light Board Department of Commissions is being held remotely on Zoom and streamed live on RCTV and YouTube. The RMLD Board of Commissioners recognizes the importance of a hearing of public comment At the discretion of the chair on items of the official agenda, we ask that all questions or comments from the public be directed to the chair, and that all parties, including members of the RMLD board, act in a professional and courteous manner when addressing the board or responding to comments. Once recognized by the chair, all persons addressing the board shall state their name and address prior to speaking. It is the role of the chair to maintain order in all public comment or ensuing discussion. Commissioner Pacino will be the board secretary. If I could please ask all Board of Commissioner and public participants to identify themselves, please. I'm Bob Coulter, the chair.
Phil Pacino, the vice chair and the secretary.
John Stempak, Commissioner.
Dave Talbot, Commissioner.
Elena Beta, Commissioner.
And I see Mike.
Yep, Mike Monahan, resident, Bancroft Ave, Reading, Massachusetts.
Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to enter into our agenda. We're going to open up with public comment.
Mr. Chair,
So please start. Jason. Let's start with James, please. Citizens Advisory Board.
At this time, we have no comment.
All right. Next step would be the liaisons to the RMLD board. And then public comment. Mike?
Is it my turn?
yeah, let him
Yeah,
let him
yes,
go
sir.
first,
Can
then
you
I'll
please
go
state
after
your name
him.
and address again?
Sure. Mike Monahan, Bancroft.
Okay, okay. Go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
My name's Mike.
Yes, we can, Mike.
My name's Mike Monahan. I live on Bancroft Ave in Reading, Massachusetts. Thanks for the opportunity for me to speak. I've never spoken to this board before, so I just ask for your patience if I deviate from standard protocols. I have two very brief items I want to talk about. The first one is I've been hearing rumors around town that the rate may be increased and for a green initiative, and there was some confusion I had whether it was going to be an opt-in or an opt-out rate increase. If it's an optional increase, I tried figuring out what direction the board was going in, but there's no minutes published since February, and I couldn't review YouTube videos for many hours. So I just want to voice my opinion, and I strongly oppose to an opt-out feature for that, and I would encourage the board to please make it opt-in. And can I get a response to that? I don't even know if it's been decided yet because I didn't see any minutes since February. Maybe my point is moved. I don't know.
It's moved at this point, Mike. We're still under discussion. So
Okay.
there is no decision at this point.
Okay, so all right, so I voiced my opinion on the second and last item I want to talk about is I noticed you don't have any minutes published since February, and I noticed from your agenda tonight you're going to be discussing, hopefully approving some minutes from March and April. I would encourage you to more timely publish minutes. I read the open meeting law, and I don't think the spirit of it is to be 6 months behind. I could be wrong, generally speaking. The reason I'm asking for that is the town of Reading is already the victim of serial open meeting law complaints being filed by a person or persons in town. It's costing me as a taxpayer, it's costing us as a taxpayer a lot of money in legal fees, and it seems like an easy situation to prevent before it happens. So I would encourage you to get your minutes filed more timely. I think to avoid legal costs, A, and B, as a citizen, I shouldn't have to have no minutes to review since February 24th. It doesn't seem right to me. So thanks for listening to me, and have a good evening.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Good comments. Yeah, it's good feedback. So thank you. Okay.
and Mr. Chair,
Speaking
I
of
got something
minutes,
public comment too.
action item,
No,
yes, sir,
Mr. Chair, I got something to public
yes,
comment.
please.
I just want to mention the,
Yes, yes, Phil.
the United Nations climate change report that came out this week. I would recommend that everybody get a copy, download a copy and read it, and some of the, that what's going to happen in terms of global warming and the effect on oceans and droughts. And, I really recommend everybody, I just want to kind of highlight and basically let everybody know that this is something out there and that, it's some pages and a lot of scientific stuff, but it's got some very interesting conclusions as to what the future is going to look like. So I would recommend everybody, go out and read it and, and get the idea of really what climate change, what's happening with climate change. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Anybody else? Okay, item number 3. Approval of the minutes from March 18th and April 22nd, 2021. Phil, if you could, please.
Okay, a couple of comments, Mr. Chair, first. I try
Yes,
to get
sir.
these minutes as fast as I can get to them as a secretary, so, I appreciate the public input on that, but, the minutes are rather lengthy. We do have software, and basically one of the problems I'm having with the software is the fact we have a lot of we's that are in there, as opposed to specifically referring to whether it's the department or whether it's the commission. We have a lot of we's in there. And then also there's things like, my favorite is on one of the items, it's, Mr. Coulter was asking about the sick policy. It actually came out, he was asking about the SOC policy, SOCK. So I found that was rather interesting in terms of that. So it does take time to go through these. I appreciate the comments, but it does take time to go through these minutes and get them in place. With the software, we're getting, the minutes are way long at this point. So I'll do the best I can as a secretary. Okay, and with that, I will move that the Board of Commissioners approve the meeting minutes of April 18th, 2021, March 18th, 2021, and April 22nd, 2021 meetings on the recommendation of General Manager.
Second,
Ready to vote?
Mr. Pacino, aye?
Mr.
Talbot,
Stempak,
aye. Talbot, aye.
Mr. Coulter, aye. Excellent. Okay, moving on to item number 4, the annual report confirmation. Action item was Colleen. Phil, if you could.
You want the motion first, Mr. Chair?
Oh, Colleen, would you like to speak first, or would you like the motion?
Well, we have some comments that Erica would have just sent you because we are trying to follow the open meeting law. So because comments came in from Commissioner Talbot, Greg and I have been working with him going back and forth for the last few days, and we feel like we've captured the comments. We also sent you the full annual report, which you looked at the last meeting, but I'll let Greg go through exactly what the changes are to reflect what the comments were. And then I guess we can deliberate as to whether or not that meets the intent of what the board would like to reflect on our procurement of power.
So good evening all. There are 2 text pages and then there are 3 chart pages. And so the text pages are basically, this is just highlighted to make sure that they synchronized with the actual data and the charts themselves. So this is pretty straightforward. These are those highlighted changes, just numbers, and they just were made sure they all tied together. So Erica, yeah, yep, those are the 2. So Erica, if you go up or down, go to the first chart. So actually go to the, so we'll start with this chart. So there's 3, we had 2 charts in there before. Based on discussion and feedback, what we created was this particular slide, and this has the same data as the chart that you saw last month, and you'll see as slide or as page number 18. Don't go to there yet. But it basically distinguishes between, from a power supply perspective, the power supply that had certificates that were retired in 2020. Then those are both hydro as well as nuclear certificates that were retired either directly by us or by MWIC on our behalf in 2020. And so that worked out to be, as we clarified everything, that worked out to be 22%. The target from the climate bill would have been 20%. If you look at the purple shaded or the purple shaded piece, those are all certificates that were sold. And so as you can see on the last line on that definition, sold certificates do not count toward any compliance bill compliance. So I'll come back to this in just a second. If you go to page 18, Erica. So this was an updated version of what we had shown you last month. And the suggestion, which was a good one, was to still have our sources indicated, which are the combination of the colored, whether it's solid or shaded. And what we ended up doing, the recommendation was, which made sense, was to take the retired one and leaves those as solid colors. And then the certificates that were sold, make those hashed or shaded. And so you have a little better sense here of what we ended up doing from a transaction perspective. We also thought it was important to indicate the transaction by source. So this is a 2020 snapshot. It's the same data as the previous. The only difference is that it indicates the mix of the certificates that we ended up selling to give the general public an idea of what we ended up doing from transactions on the certificate sales side. That's for 2020. Obviously, as you look at this chart, this is an outlook through 2030. So we have based on our portfolio and our policy 30 Rev 1, which we approved earlier this year, that annualized line, that solid green line, it's the same one we've had in there consistently, but it basically takes us from 2020, the requirement from the climate bill of 20% to by 2030, 50% of the portfolio needs to have certificates that are retired. And that's what that annualized line is, and it increases by 3% per year. The next, go to slide 19, or not slide, but page 19, sorry. So this basically is the same data. It ties into, it's a tabular version of what's in the previous two charts. The main cleanup here was not really the data, but just the names. So instead of saying renewable, et cetera, we basically did it by source. So if we go back to page 18, so all of this basically is the transaction by source, and then page 17. This is what we actually have reported or will report at the end of each year, 2021 through 2030. So that's the snapshot of the changes we made. The rest of the text in the annual report remain the same, unchanged. Questions or discussions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please, Dave.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Greg and Colleen. We had a good call a couple days ago about this. And if you could just go and the backing up before that, a couple days before that, they had sent this slide with some different words to me and John Stempek for, some feedback. I don't know what, if anything, John sent back, but then I had some feedback and then we had a conversation. Real quick, just the previous page, please. The first of the graphics, that one. So this is what that one. So this is our power supply net of RECs, and my proposal, and this is what they created based on what I suggested, and I think this is the accurate statement of what our power supply actually is, net of REC sales. And it's not just by climate bill compliance, it's by what RECs mean and what REC sales mean. So I think this is the slide this is the page that really is the page. The next one, if you could just, go to the next one real quick. And I appreciate the efforts to crosshatch. Somebody else had suggested the crosshatching. To me, I appreciate the efforts. I think that it's still a little misleading because I don't think hydro sold is a source, or solar sold is a source, or wind sold is a source. By definition, when you sell the RECs, you can't say it's wind, solar, or hydro anymore. So to me, we did make some progress, and I'm really grateful for that and your time. I think if this is the final version, I'll probably be abstaining from the vote. The next page also still says that those other renewables are sources when we sold the RECs. So we sold the solar and wind RECs, then I don't think those are sources anymore. So that's others may disagree, that's my take. If I had some other opinion, that I would feel better about it, but I think I'll abstain based on this. Thank you very much for your efforts.
Any further comments? Okay,
Ready for
Phil,
the
if you could read the motion, please.
Oh,
Yep.
Bob, sorry. Is it too late?
Sure. No, Marlena, no.
Just so I'm clear, 2 commissioners received this week and not all 5 of us. I would just need more time to read it than tonight. Is that correct, though? That only
Well, I think at
Albert
this
and
point,
Mr. Stepek.
this is a rework of information that was there per request of Dave. So it's going through its iteration. So it's a change of the graphic to represent our power in a different manner. And it's a little bit more finite. I'd like to vote tonight, if that's your choice, Marlena, if you would like to abstain, because I think this is the second time we've gone over this. I think delaying it is we're just going to keep tweaking and tweaking. It's just going to go on. I'd like to push it to a vote tonight. So
I understand. I just,
but
okay.
to your
Just so
point,
I understand that
not-
it didn't go, I didn't miss an email.
didn't
It only
receive it
went to
either.
people.
No, I think the effort was trying not to have a discussion on email and abiding by the open meeting law. Sometimes it's very difficult where you could collaborate on a slide on the back, but together. But I think that's why it was very, and I don't want to speak for you, Dave, but I think that was, and John, but I think that was your effort.
Yes, that was certainly my effort. I mean, I had really no issue with the previous slides, which is why I didn't respond. I do think that in the future, we should certainly send it to everybody, all the commissioners. I think it's totally appropriate to do that, just to be able to get their input as well. And but otherwise, I have no issue with what has been presented here.
Yeah, and I think to John's point, it probably should have gone to all 5. The issue would come is if one commissioner was to reply back to a quorum, or if one commissioner sent to staff and staff sent to a quorum before the meeting. That's when the open meeting law issue is, not staff soliciting opinion from all 5. If each of the 5 responds back to staff. But anyway, I don't want to keep.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. Right.
No,
right.
yeah, we're good.
Stay on point. Okay, so Phil, if we could.
Yeah, very good. Move that the Board of Commissioners approve the annual report for calendar year 2020 as presented on the recommendation of the General Manager.
Second,
Okay. Let's take a vote.
Ms. Pacino,
Yeah,
aye.
abstain.
Mr. Stempak, aye.
Talbot abstain.
Mr. Coulter, aye. Okay. So 3 ayes, 2 abstains. It passes, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
Correct.
Okay. All right. If we could move on to item number 5 on the agenda.
Yeah, Bob, I'm going to start if you don't mind. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so staff has worked really hard to package this. There's a number of different issues that we have to get through that have to do with rates. After finishing the class cost of service study, the energy efficiency charge, we're coming up with a new A3 rate that I've talked about with you in the past. Renewable choice, all the rate classes, and we're going to present this so that it's going to happen over the next 3 months, okay, over the next 3 meetings. Some of the areas that we have to be mindful of are, if we have a vote that has to do with a rate, the CAB, even though there's a motion on the agenda for them, they do have 30 days. So I talked to Jason before the meeting. It's not to pressure anybody, it's just, it's there. And if we want to try to get some of these done, we have a lot to do over the next 3 months. And why is that important? Because the 20-year agreement says that we have to get the budget done and give certain amounts of time. So the budget has to go out the end of September, right? So we're going to be spending time going over the budgets, and we all know that the rates dovetail into the financials for the budget. So it's kind of a chicken and an egg. So we're going to try to present it tonight and take each part so that you have plenty of time to think about it. But when we get to the other end, we've still got to get the budget done. And the CAB still has their 30 days. So if we're mindful of that, then I'll ask Greg to start going through each one of these. And I think it'll be just like all of our presentations, very educational. And I think it'll lead for movement forward. All right, thanks.
All right, I'm going to share screen here. Great. You guys should see the head slide.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. All right, perfect. So you guys have a copy of this obviously already, but we're going to talk briefly. The first 2 items there, the class cost of service. I'll walk through that very briefly and then give you some additional context, which really sets the stage. As Colleen mentioned, we're going to try and bring you an update on the solar incentive and what our plans are with that, and then move into the efficiency and electrification charge, which will require motions, a new A3 rate, which will require motion and approval, and then the discussion on the renewable rate. And then the Commissioner Bitta had put together some other materials, which we will bring up as we get to the last topic, that renewable choice piece. So that's what we're going to try and cover. Again, this is part of a bigger discussion. The class cost of service, at the end of the day, or at the bottom line, at this point in time, the actual class cost of service study is complete. There was significant analysis associated with that, a lot of analysis done by PLM. They are the group that did the work back the last time in 2017. There's a lot of material here, and it is data intensive. You probably got a sense from these slides that the rate discussion is data intensive by itself. So I'm going to try and give you the highlights. At the end of the day, the current rates are within normal range. But as we look at the context that we'd mentioned to you before, the peak shift, the drive toward electrification, the transition from flat to negative growth to positive growth, those are all have prompted us to look very carefully in terms of the rates that we'll put in place going forward. There are several actions that we can actually take care of tonight, which I outlined just a few moments ago. And obviously the results of the class cost of service study is incorporated into the recommendations that we have. We had talked before, this is just a quick background. The goals behind the rates, they're on the left-hand side here. The key pieces are in bold text, but all the work that we do is to design rates to cover the cost of providing service, right? Pretty straightforward. There's a continual intention to allocate the cost fairly across the various rate classes, and that's where a lot of the analysis comes in. As we've talked about in the past and has been in place since actually 2008, is to provide funds for efficiency and electrification incentives. The other piece that you guys noticed that came out of the customer survey was to give the customer A, better understanding, but B, begin to give them more control of their energy use. And this is going to take time, but this is the direction that we're going. And then, of course, we have to comply with both DPU and RMLD policies and any other statutory requirements. So there's always a compliance piece that we have to deal with. So that's how we think about the big picture goals when we look at rates. There's a process that we go through, that's that middle box. I'm gonna walk through each, I won't walk through each individual item. You guys have a sense of the process. We tend to take a 3-year horizon when we look at rates. It's important that as we look at rates, we clarify each time what the objectives are and the desired behaviors. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. And obviously at the very end of it, there probably should be a bullet 8 that says we propose the final rates themselves. The desired outcomes, the main thread in this new context, one is electrification. The second thing is generation and load management. Electrification is pretty straightforward. I'll talk about that in just a second. And then customer control, we talked about just a few moments ago. In the case of electrification, that second bullet, we're going to continue to design programs that'll afford and motivate heat pump installations within our territory, both in the commercial, which has been where the main focus has been, and also on commercial as well. We'll talk a little bit later on, but there is a program that's been in place called custom incentives that really fits into the larger scale commercial and the larger scale industrial. So really, when we think about electrification and our incentives, they are intended and targeted toward all rate classes. That encourage EV adoption is something relatively new. You recall that we had an EV workshop back in April. We actually have an EV electric vehicle car show as part of the Wilmington Farmers Market this Sunday. Please come by. I think there'll be about 20 different electric vehicles, different types, et cetera. But when we look at this adoption, what we have already in place, the incentives for chargers, and what you're going to see we're trying to do with that A3 rate is to provide additional incentive for our rate base to consider an EV purchase as they look at buying new vehicles on the schedule that they do on a regular basis. So that electrification is a real key thread in today's context, and you read about that in the news. Commissioner Pacino had mentioned that's a topic not only in our rate territory and the state level, national level, but on an international level as well. The generation box is very important. We want to, where we can, increase generation within our territory. Part of the reasons for doing that is to, as we generate within our territory, those kilowatt hours are not subject to capacity and transmission costs, which, as you remember from our earlier discussions on the previous slide, is about 40% of the cost. So to the extent that we can generate within territory, that's good. The reality is solar is really the main generation source that is at our fingertips right now. So you'll see on our program some motivations to increase that. Pardon me just for a second. I'm going to close my door while the vacuum goes by. Sorry about that. So that generation is a critical piece. The other piece on the load, you'll see in the second and third bullets there. Today, you probably all, we talked about it as we were coming on, but hour ending 18, so between 5 and 6 was a peak. It's probably going to be the monthly peak for this month, August. It is highly unlikely, given the results from the ISO New England site, that it'll be the annual peak. But nevertheless, what we try and do, as we talked about before, the chairman is keeping his air conditioner off. He's trying to support the peak. But anyways, that whole thread and that whole thought is to prompt load shifts away from the afternoon peak hours, which is a little bit broader, but typically between 4 and 6 p.m. And particularly the summer peaks, because that's where the capacity comes in. The other thing that you're going to see in our A3 rate structure is to encourage EV charging overnight. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail, but we basically have open capacity in our network to provide additional kWh, additional kilowatt hours in the middle of the night. And so we'll talk about how we design the rate structure to encourage that. That last part of this slide is about customer control and customer awareness. And one of the things that as RMLD we're doing between the IRD and the finance group is we're going to look at how to make the billing easier and simpler for our customers, yet still have the detail that those that are interested in the detail. But the second piece at the very bottom there is to equip the customers to affect or to make choices relative to their energy costs. So we're just beginning this, and there's a lot behind this. It was one of the requests in the customer survey, and it's what we want to do as well. So customer portals, customer apps, all sorts of stuff like that you're going to start seeing. But that just, in terms of us thinking about rates, we're trying to provide places for customers to make choices. All right. The load forecast, just to put things in a little bit of perspective, that chart to the right we saw before, just to give that spider chart, is from the last time we got together. That's historical, 2019, 2020, 2021. And then the table here, just to highlight a few items here. Again, just to emphasize to you the data intensity of the rate structure and the rate analysis and the rate recommendations that we do. But all of it starts with a load forecast. So this is a simplified snapshot of what the load looks like. And as we talked about before, we're looking at an increase where before we were basically flat. As we go 22 to 2025, you can get an idea on that bottom percent change of the increase. This is probably on the conservative side, but again, from a budgeting and rate perspective, we want to be on the conservative side. If it ends up being higher, then that's great, but we want to be careful. Obviously, we talked about before, residential, commercial, and industrial. Those are the three largest rate classes. We do pay very close attention to the other four categories, the other four rates: school, municipal streetlights, and private area streetlights. The co-op is a small part of the business that basically is given some of the periphery where we share billing and supply responsibilities with our neighboring MLPs. But the school and the municipal streetlights and the private streetlights, all of them we pay close attention to. The one takeaway from here as we think about it, without getting too deep into the numbers, obviously the residential is larger. It produces higher revenues. It's also growing faster. It covers more geography. That more geography is very important. And near term, as we present in the next 2 months, the actual rate, you're going to understand what the numbers look like, because this data here shows that the residential, while it's growing and has a larger geography, it's going to require a larger percentage of the network investment going forward in time. That's not to say that the Wilmington substation, that's a requirement to support the CNIs in the upper part of our area. That's a given. Now we're looking beyond that in terms of what goes forward. So just to keep that context in mind. This is just to kind of put a little bit of context and set the stage for the discussion, for the motions for tonight, but also for the next two meetings. I don't expect you guys to memorize the numbers. What I really want to draw your attention to is that box in the center, which is the average rate. This is dollars per kilowatt hour. And these are averages across all of these rate classes. So it's the total revenue divided by the total load. And there's all customers fit in different areas, but that gives you a relative size where the residential it averages about 15 cents a kilowatt hour. And on the lower end of the range, we have the industrial, including their time of use, which averages just below 11 cents a kilowatt hour. And then the commercials in between there. I give you that context because it's going to set the stage for discussions going forward in terms of how we look at what we charge. And from the previous slide, the investment required to support these different customer classes. There is, so now to kind of move into the action plans for this evening. There's a solar incentive. It's actually available to all rate classes, but just given the way our incentive structures are configured, it's primarily the people that take advantage of it are the residential and the smaller CNI. As I mentioned before, that first bullet, our intention is to continue to promote the installation of generation and obviously non-carbon generation in our territory. And so solar is one of the mechanisms. The annual installations from our residential, our residential and small CNI program, it's averaging about 30 installations per year. And the average installation is about 8.5 kilowatts per installation. It's important to give you a little bit of context. For the past almost 2 years, the Massachusetts DOER has had a matching grant to the tune of $600 per kilowatt. And that was matched against our existing incentive also of $600 per kilowatt KW. Those funds were actually supposed to end at the end of last year, end of 2020, but they continued on through roughly into the June period of this year, 2021. But those funds are all gone. And what we would like to do, what we're planning to do, is to continue the existing program. Before I get down to the action plan here, that would basically mean that our incentive would be paying $1,200 per kilowatt of system installed on an incremental basis to our budget. We'll talk about the budget here in the next slide, but that's about an incremental $150,000 at the rate of about 30 installations per year. That investment from an RMLD ratepayer perspective, by adding those and gaining all the benefits associated with them, which goes back up to the top bullet, that payback period is around 6 years. So that $1,200 investment, $1,200 per kilowatt investment for a typical system, basically has a 6-year payback on a 25-year system. There are limits, of course. The incentives expire, or the incentives only apply to units that are 20 kW or smaller. And I remember I said if they're larger ones, we have a separate program for the larger units. And it also has a limit of 50% of project cost. So just to kind of give you a big picture of where this is. So what our plan, our action plan, for all the reasons just mentioned, the benefit to the ratepayers and the benefit to putting generation within our territory, is to continue the existing program with no change from the customer viewpoint, which means that those applications that are already in and those that would come in for the next 18 to 24 months, it would still be the $1,200 per kW. So in effect, what we would end up doing by doing this is increasing the incentive from $600 to kW to $1,200 per kW. Basically, we'd be replacing with RMLD funds, the DOER match. Our intention is to make it effective immediately. And the idea behind that is that the DOER MLP program, as it was called, was fairly lengthy. So there are many applications that are in the queue, and some that were ready for approval at the same time the funds ran out. So our intention basically would be to keep this in place and then reevaluate this in early 2023. The other related piece, you guys have heard consistently about the importance of batteries or storage tied to solar systems. And we are supportive of that. We think it's great. Obviously, you know that we have a battery in our system by itself, a standalone battery. We're looking at the economics, and we're basically planning in early 2020 to reevaluate adding storage, either in addition to or tied to this incentive. But that's going to be a 2022 event. So our plan right now, effective immediately, is to put the solar incentive in place that would keep it from a customer perspective at $1,200 per kW. Now, I'm going to put that in the context of the bigger budget, right, which is the efficiency and electrification charge, which is formerly known, and we'll talk about this transition in just a moment, as the ECC. So this table in the upper left-hand corner is basically the combined budget, and it includes the previous slide. It includes the assumption that we'd have that solar incentive at that $1,200 per kW rate. And what has happened between 2020 and 2021, last year we actually repackaged the heat pump program, the air source heat pump for HVAC applications. And we had a little bit of stumbling getting that. There were so many applications that came in last fall and over the winter. We had to adjust our internal processes to be handling that volume. But that volume is continuing. It's a very successful program. It supports the electrification goal from RMLD's perspective, as well as from a state perspective. And so you'll see in the residential incentives, the majority of that residential line below in the middle of that box there. You guys can see my mouse actually, can't you? The majority of that is air source heat pump. In fact, in 2022, that 2022 forecast, about 40% of the total dollars of 2.5 million are air source heat pump specific. The other big piece are solar related, and then custom on the commercial side as well. As you recall, since 2013, we have been collecting 1/10 of 1 cent per kWh, per kilowatt hour sold, which has been in place, well, since 2013. And up until last year and this year, that was more than adequate to support the incentives that were paid out to our residents, to our customers. But given the growth of the heat pump and the commercial lighting and the solar piece, you're going to see, if you look at it from 2021, and this is year-to-date actuals through June, and then the forecast for the balance of the year, third and fourth quarter, we're going to be just under $2 million. And if you look at the EEC collected, at the rate we are, we're going to be just under $660,000 collected. So we're going to end up with a deficit of about $1.3 million. What we're looking at for what you'll see for 2022 is we're going to continue the programs as they are. We continue to make adjustments to each one of them, but we're confident that the Air Force heat pump is a good program. Just to put things in perspective, in 2020, it was just under 20 systems were processed. In 2021, we forecasted a little bit over 200, and already a little more than halfway through the year, we have 150 applications in. For perspective, there are about 1,300 heating systems installed in our territory each year. And our goal is to look at it. So our goal is to encourage and support, but also the climate bill will mandate this. But to basically support the adoption of air source heat pumps in lieu of oil and in lieu of natural gas and in lieu of propane systems. So that's the biggest piece of that residential incentives. So that's kind of the context behind where we are. That there's 3 lines across the bottom, difference, transfer, and cumulative difference. And so as you noticed coming out of 2020, we were short just a little over 300,000. That's going to grow in 2021. The real message here is twofold. One, and I'll bring this recommendation in just a second, but that recommendation A is to transfer $2.5 million from the unrestricted operating fund into the Energy Conservation Reserve. That will basically make us positive for the year. Related to that is that item C is we are going to recommend that we increase our incentive charge from 1/10 of 1 cent per kilowatt hour sold to 3/10. It doesn't cover the entire incentive program, but as you can see, in the next 3 years, we have a plan to still allow us to continue providing the incentives to our customers. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, that rate, that 3/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour is applied to all rate classes equally. And at the same time, all the rate classes have the ability to participate in the various incentives as well. So there's balance and fairness between all the rate classes. That's the intention of the design and the way we designed the programs. So that's, I'm going to pause here just for a moment. I guess the other, you probably had a chance to look at the information on the right-hand side. 2 key points. That rate increase from 1/10 of a cent to 3/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour on a typical residential bill would increase that bill $1.64. Again, typical, which is about a 1.4% increase relative to what the rate is right now. The other thing to keep in mind is that most MLPs are right around those. Most MLPs don't break out an EEC or an ECC charge. Those that do are right around 2/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour. And then the IOUs are a little bit more expensive because they have broader programs. They're at 1.7 cents per kilowatt hour, just for reference. So anyways, that's a little bit of background. So what we want to do here, we just want to pause for a moment, make the recommendation on the transfer. We're going to have to, that will be just for the, well, actually, Mr. Chairman, I'll let you drive now for a minute, and then I'll take discussion questions. But the first thing we want to do basically is do the transfer motion just for the board, and then we'll come back and do the other 2 with the cab and then the board.
Okay. why don't, Phil, unless there's any, is there any discussion on the transfer, specifically the 2.5 million?
Mr. Coulter, I think that's exactly the right thing to do. That's sort of what the funds were meant to accomplish in the first place. I think over the entire lifetime of the RMLD is to fund various programs that do these types of things. So I think it's exactly the right thing to do.
Thank you, John. Any further comments?
Just a brief one, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
I agree with that. I'm wondering what the wider set of, kind of appliance and so forth rebates are coming or proposed. And, is there a wider set of these?
Yeah, if I may, we have an extremely broad set of incentives, appliances, yard tools. Yard tools is actually fairly unique. We actually started that. Mass Save actually adopted that, looking at our program. So we have a pretty broad set of incentives. We do panel upgrades, and they're all listed on the website. So we as a utility have a very broad set of incentives to encourage electrification.
I understand. I meant on the efficiency side. And are we thinking of any changes on the efficiency side? Not that I know what they should be. But are we don't have to get into it tonight. I'm just curious.
No, I think that's an appropriate question. So for example, on air source heat pump, so each year right now, we increase the level to qualify for a rebate, for example. So yes, we continue to increase the efficiency of the individual appliances, and for that matter, and more importantly, the air source heat pumps as example. Yes, we do.
Okay, what is it on air conditioners? What's the SEER that we require?
I think we're up at, there's a summer and a winter, and I want to say it's in the high teens on both, but I'd have to pull that up. I don't have that off the top of my head, to be honest. But it's on the website. It's clearly stated. And notice when you go to the website, we keep track at the bottom of each one of those what changes were made when, so people have an idea. They can see the increases.
All right, thank you.
Any further comments? Hearing
Mr.
none,
Chair,
Phil, could you please read the motion? Oh, I'm sorry.
Did Vivek want to speak?
yeah, no,
Sorry, go ahead.
I just had a question on the incentives. I just want to understand, because there's numbers like, Greg, you said like it was $150,000 estimated for solar programs, and I presume the rest is air source heat pumps. So are the numbers we are seeing here, are those the limits at which you will stop? Just want to understand what those numbers mean.
Yeah, good question, Vivek. The two things. So the 150 is just the match. So we've been averaging 30 units installed or 30 rebates paid out on the solar. And we expect that to continue at a fairly level rate. And so we were basically contributing roughly about $150,000 a year to that, and at least for the past 2 years, and Mass DOER was matching. And so the incremental costs, so our total cost just on the smaller solar is a little bit over 300,000. The second question, and as I mentioned before, the air source heat pump is probably 40% of it. Our goal and our intention is to be aggressive in terms of electrification incentives. We continue to look at what we have, make adjustments, and look for new ones, but to keep driving the electrification. Our strategy right now is not to put a cap on any of these, because they've grown a lot, but they're not crazy. At least we don't think they're crazy. They're supporting the electrification. And one thing to keep in mind, particularly on the air source heat pump, is that an air source heat pump that is paid to an individual, whoever applies and is open to everybody, that benefits the individual by encouraging them to buy a more energy efficient system, but it also benefits the other ratepayers that all the other ratepayers that haven't bought the system, from the perspective that that heat pump is going to draw or use more electricity than oil or natural gas, obviously. And that additional kWh basically allows for less upward pressure on the rates on a kWh basis. So the key thing to keep in mind, Vivek, is that these programs are not only good from a climate perspective, they're not only good from electrification perspective and carbon perspective, but also each one of these benefits not only the people that use it, but also the rest of the ratepayers, which is pretty unique.
Okay, so in principle, if you had a lot of people signing up, you may end up putting out more than what you list here, but and that would be
that is possible. That is possible.
Okay.
And as if that accelerates a little bit more than we planned, obviously we come back and let both the CAB and the Board of Commissioners know where we are.
All right, thank you. But there's no limit. So the main point you said is there's no limit.
Not right now, and on purpose. There's no limit right now. Correct.
Thank you.
If I could please ask a question. If the DOER returns the rebate, would you, obviously that'd be benefit us and you would just adjust accordingly. I'm not making that assumption.
Yes, I think I heard you, Chairman, that if the DOR puts a matching fund back in, our intention would be to keep the total at 1,200 per KW. So we would drop back down to 6 or whatever number they came up with, if that happened, yes.
Okay, and then, and a follow-up, is the customer forced to sell back to RMLD? Can they go in the wholesale market?
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Say that question one more time, just to make sure I heard you. I'm sorry.
Bob, did we lose you?
I think he was asking about the sellback and, oh, he's back, sorry. Commissioner, I missed the part of your question.
Exactly. Right, sorry.
Bob, you're not coming through very well, Bob.
Asking to sell back to RMLD or, yeah, unfortunately.
There we go.
Are we forcing the customer to sell back to RMLD, or can they go wholesale?
I think I heard your question. Can they self-supply their home and then whatever's excess sell back? Is that the question?
Sell wholesale back to another MLP, basically wholesale back onto the market. If you have solar, you don't have, and you're in an.
Yes, no, in the case of the MLP, any sales that come back are bought only by RMLD. That it's not given our structure, we don't have an open market to let the customer sell to other people currently. That still there?
Okay.
Bob, you're experiencing a lot of audio feedback for some reason.
Yeah, I'm having a tough internet connection right now. I'm not too sure why. So sorry. Apologize for that, everybody.
You're back now. You read the motion, yes.
Motion, Bob, if you're there. I'll move with it. Move that the Board of Commissioners vote to approve a transfer of funds from unrestricted operating funds to the Energy Conservation Reserve by September 30, 2021.
Second, John Stempak.
Ms. Pacino, aye.
Mr. Stempak, aye.
So Talbot, aye.
Rita, aye.
Bob still there? Okay.
Bob, we're still missing.
He just popped out. He said he's having a wireless issue.
Okay. All right. Why don't I'll take over, and then if he comes back in, Erica, let me know, okay? And I'll get off.
Sounds
Right.
good.
So, we have 4 votes. So the motion does pass. So Greg, if you want to move on at this point.
Okay, great.
If
So,
Bob comes back in, I will step back out again.
okay, Commissioner Pacino, so the next motion actually goes first to the CAB, and they can choose to vote tonight, or they can choose to take 30 days to digest. Jason, the second motion before you would be to change the name from the energy conservation charge to the efficiency electrification charge to reflect the trend and the new world of electrification. And then on a related note, we would be increasing the rate from 1/10 of a cent to 3/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour for all rate classes. And that would be effective January 1st of 2022. In your packet, there was an MDPU rate that we have not submitted. It's a draft right now, but if it's approved, we would submit it in October and make the rate effective January 1st. And that it would be 208 being replaced by 292. It basically covers the stuff we just talked about.
Does any advisory board members have anything to discuss on this? Or any comments they want to make?
Sorry, just this Vivek, a question for Greg. So these, you didn't specifically mention what MDPU 292 is, right? So
so basically,
I'm just trying to decide what's the process here to try to take a decision today or.
yeah, the process basically is for you as a CAB to the way the 208 was structured and 292 replaces 208's exact same structure. It's fundamentally changing the name. And then the other thing that 208 had established, rate schedule 208 is, and 292 now establishes, is we basically define the rate based on the cost incurred. And in this particular case, with the transfer of the funds, the rate doesn't have to be as high. If we didn't do the rate transfer, it'd be 1/2 cent, but we made it 3/10 of a cent. And so basically what you're really doing is just approving a new rate schedule, which is primarily a new name. Make sense? And it's in the package you guys received, hopefully. It's a short 2-paragraph rate. And what we would ask you to do is to consider approving that this evening, if you are so inclined, as a CAB.
So we saw the 208, right? I can see the 208. I don't see a 292.
So the 292 should be in the back of the package that you received yesterday.
Yeah, no, I see a 293. I see a 294. I don't see a 292.
Vivek, it says it's the first page.
Okay. So sorry. Okay, it says 292 supersedes. Got it. Okay, got it. All right.
It's pretty simple, this one.
Okay, all right, fine. I'm sorry, I was reading 208. It's just like, yeah, all right.
Oh yeah, that's the format. Yeah.
Dennis, do you have any comments or questions? And if not, I guess I mean I'm prepared to vote on this tonight.
Okay, all right.
I'm prepared to vote, I think.
Go for it.
Okay, so can I have a motion?
All right, I can read the motion here. One sec. All right, so the motion is that move that the Citizens Advisory Board recommend that the Board of Commissioners vote to accept the General Manager's recommendation to replace the current MDPU 208 rate with the MDPU 292 energy efficiency electrification charge, EEC, effective on billing on or after January 1st, 2022.
Second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Vivek?
Okay, Vivek Soni, aye.
Dennis?
Dennis Kelly, aye.
Jason Small, aye. Motion passes 3-0.
Is Bob back on yet?
Yeah, Phil, I'm back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. If you If
Bob,
you wanna-
just for information on the previous motion on the transfer, did you record your vote as yes?
I will record my vote as yes.
Okay, so noted. Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Back in your hands.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, Phil, would
Okay.
you
Move
like to read the
that
motion?
Commissioners, on the recommendation of the Citizens Advisory Board, vote to accept the general manager's recommendation to replace the current Mass DPU 208 rate with Mass DPU 292 efficiency electrification charge, EEC, effective on billings on or after January 1st, 2022.
Second, John
That's the
Stupak.
motion that there's- I added an S on the last sentence where it says billings as opposed to billing. I assume we're going to do more than one billing, I would hope.
You're correct.
Yeah.
So,
I have a,
here a second. Could
Okay,
we
John
please
Stupak.
take a roll call vote?
Ms. Pacino, aye?
Mr. Stupak, aye.
Talbot, aye.
Beta, aye.
Mr. Coulter, aye. Passes 5-0. All right. Moving down,
Okay,
slide 10.
yep, I'll keep rolling forward. Thank you. Sorry about the complication and thank you for the responsiveness and flexibility. Okay, the second is the recommendation is a new residential A3 time of use rate. This available, it's a residential rate, so it's available to all customers, but its intention is to be EV focused. And remember, early on, what we talked about is encouraging through rates to the extent that this is persuasive to customers looking at and considering electric vehicles from an economic perspective. Obviously, there's an environmental perspective that always sits in place, but the intention would be to offer a more substantial, what we call fuel savings in the form of electricity. Obviously, as we talked about before, we will continue as the RMLD staff and team to drive more customer education and more awareness. And I mentioned some of the things that are happening this weekend and going forward. We'll probably do our next EV event in January, and we're going to probably do our next heat pump event in November. We'll give you those dates a little bit later. So the intention behind this is to encourage adoption. Typically, an EV for our customer, again, typical averages, everybody's a little bit different in terms of the driving patterns, but a customer will add around 380 kWh per month. Just to put things in perspective, the typical or the average RMLD residential customer is 820 kWh per month. So this is not quite a 50% increase in terms of kWh use. So it's not a trivial matter for them. A typical charge adds about 30% of capacity. People tend not to let their, again, it's still new. People are still, there's not as many out there. People are still learning, but typically people will add about 30% capacity during a typical charge. And that typical charge is roughly about 3 hours. All right. The reason why that data is important, if you look at that chart in the lower left-hand corner, this chart is actual 2019 data. It is a sampling of 500 of our residential customers. Remember, we have about 26,000, and it basically looks at their load profile by month. And so on the left-hand side is kWh, and across the bottom, this is that colored chart across the bottom. Maybe you guys can see my mouse. But as you take a look across the bottom, this is basically from midnight. The middle of the chart is noon, and then the far right-hand side is midnight. So this is basically a 24-hour load curve for a typical residential customer by month. And you can see this dark blue one here is the July one, right? And then you notice in the shoulder months they're a little bit lower. you can see the word charge here. And our intention is our network is configured, the work that the E&O team does, Hamid and John, their team, is to have our network be able to handle the maximum peak load at any individual hour. And if you look at the middle of the night, whether it's summer or winter or spring or fall, we have open capacity. And so what we're trying to do with this rate structure is encourage charging during that open capacity. And that fits on this, again, for residential, that fits the typical charging profile for, again, typical EV owners or new EV owners. What we're also trying to do, as you notice from today, right? Today was a peak day. We want to discourage charging during peak hours because EVs are fairly significant in terms of the demand, the load. Again, that 380 out of the 820 that I mentioned earlier. So what we have structured, and we're trying to balance the goal to provide additional incentive to charge at night and to discourage charging in the middle of the afternoon. We basically developed 3 8-hour periods. So the 3 8-hour periods are in that table right in the middle. So there's 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. and we want to offer a highly discounted rate during those hours where our fixed costs are fixed. And if we can add incremental volume or incremental kWh during those hours, we want to do that. This 8 cents, what we'll end up proposing, and it'll vary depending upon fuel charges and seasonal, et cetera, but typically, the average is going to be roughly comparative to rates today is going to be 8 cents. And then the shoulder, which is basically the morning, 6 a.m. till 2 p.m., a moderate discount. Again, this is relative to the average 15 cents that is in place right now. And I'll talk about A2 in just a second. That would be 12 cents. And then to discourage, but not to prevent, but to discourage charging between 2 and 10 p.m. is the 24 cents. So that's higher than the 15. The other thing to keep in, so that's the thought process behind this. We do have an A2 rate right now. The A2 rate has a peak between noon and 7, and then regular hours, anything around that. And there's it's about 20 cents a kilowatt hour during the 12 to 7, and then it's roughly somewhere between around 11 cents a kilowatt hour in the off hours. So we're basically, what we're doing with this, we're not going to take away the A2 rate yet. We're not going to take it away right now, but we're really trying to have this A3 rate be a lower rate to encourage that overnight charging. And so that's why we created these 3 tiers. So we can have a little more discussions in a few minutes, but I think you guys have the highlights of what we're trying to do here. So the recommendation that we're asking for is to add a new residential A3 time of use rate. And oh, by the way, even if you don't have an electric vehicle and you want to jump onto this rate, you can. But you want to look at your load profile. It will probably be more expensive because most of your load that's not EV related is in the early evening, which would be the peak time. So you can, but it's probably not many people would do that unless their profile is a little bit different. This A3 rate would have 3 tiers, as we just talked about. We'd make it effective January 2022. If we can do anything earlier than that, we would do that. But we just want to make sure we got all the mechanics lined up between the billing and the communications, et cetera. And obviously on an ongoing basis with this included, because we're trying to drive a different behavior, we're trying to drive adoption of more EVs, we're going to increase the communication to our ratepayers, as we mentioned before. So that is the recommendation for a new A3 residential rate with the intention to encourage faster EV adoption. I'll pause here for the motions. And again, for any questions, but the sequence will be just like we did a moment ago, which would be first the CAB, and the CAB has the right to defer if they'd like to, or they can choose to vote tonight. And then depending upon what they do, then we bring it to the Board of Commissioners as a recommendation. So I'll pause for a moment.
Mr. Chair, I have just a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, please, John.
Greg, this is really interesting. The question I have is really centered around the mechanism of almost allowing people to charge their EVs without having to think about it, at this new rate. And so is there I know we have a program to help people install the chargers in their garages or wherever. But is there a timer associated with that as well so that they could just go, yeah, we're going to go on to this rate and the timer itself will take care of it and they don't even have to think about it, as opposed to them having to, voluntarily or think about, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock at night or 11. It's time for me to recharge it and go down there and do it.
Yeah. So the way many of the new vehicles today, and I speak from personal experience, new vehicles today, and I don't know how recently they started, but most of them have the ability to, on a regular basis, for example, if it's always at home, you can set it up fairly easily to always start charging at 10 or 11 or midnight. There's different ways to do it, but yes, you can basically, when you pull into your garage or your driveway or wherever you might have your residential charger set up, just plug it in, jump out of the car, plug it in, and then it will automatically, if you have it set up right, charge during the off-peak hours. So that's a capability built into just about all the new vehicles coming out today. I won't say all because I haven't checked every one of them, but the common ones. So yes, to answer your question, it's built into the car. It's not built into our system. Now, the second thing that we mentioned before, you're going to see next year, we talked about dashboards and apps. One of the things that we're going to do, which we'll talk about in a few months, is basically start working on more control for the customers. What's interesting about EVs is that, well, I'll leave it at that. So hopefully that's your question.
Yeah, that's really good. I just one follow-on question, and that's if a customer had, let's say, a wall mount battery unit that they wanted to use to charge, and then that would give them the freedom to charge at any time, right?
Say that one more time. I missed the question.
Well, Tesla supplies, for example, a wall-mounted unit for.
Oh, yes,
right.
Sir.
So why not? I mean, could they use that to actually sort of charge that so that it's basically ready, so they could actually charge their car at any time with the freedom, as long as they had that charger. I mean, it's not inexpensive to have that battery, basically.
Yeah, I think part of you're right. Part of the goal about putting this in place is there aren't that many. We were trying to encourage more and more, and the customers are going to be creative in terms of how they look at that. And so we want to learn along with them, but we really want to motivate them to get more EVs into our territory. But you're right, that's a possibility.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question for Greg.
Yes, please.
This is it's a great rate, and it's interesting to think what if this was applied just to everybody, how it would change your profile and how it would kind of solve all our peak problems in one shot. I know that's really untenable, but just food for thought.
Oh no, we thought yes.
Yeah, it would be nice to price the peak higher for everybody and figure out ways to do that over time. But the piece about this is, people who own electric cars also have other things going on in their house. And what you're doing here is you're tripling what it's costing them to use electricity when they get home from work for other things, from 4 to through dinner and 8 and 9 with this central AC going, you just tripled their rates for all that other stuff. And you can trickle charge a car overnight. I'm wondering if people are going to look at this and say, yeah, I can charge my car for very little, but all my other stuff is going to be so expensive, especially in that afternoon to evening, that it's not on balance. Like I have a time of use A2. I won't switch to this. I have an electric car and I have A2. I will not switch to this.
Can I make a comment, Derek, before you answer? And Mr. Talbot, just to, we had a Tesla here, and my son who had the Tesla said that if you use the trickle charge on it, you get 4 miles per hour worth of charge.
I know it very well. I've had an electric car for 5 years.
Okay, so you know that it's like nothing. I mean, 4 miles per hour. Come on.
Right, but as an owner of one, it's actually plenty for what you need overnight to get you through the next day, and a charger at work. It's actually, we've only used the trickle charger and it's been fine for 5 years. So as an owner, I understand this very well. But even with the second level up at the 3,000 watts, you can add 10 miles of an hour and you're going to you'll get 80 miles of range out of this overnight, each night. And you don't have to car every day.
Yeah, let's not get into the, statistics on cars, right? But Dave makes a very valid point about this becomes a penalizing cost for peak hours for someone to adopt. Yeah, you nailed it, Dave. I think you nailed it.
Once every 15 meetings.
Right.
If I may, Chairman?
Yes,
If I
please.
may? Yeah, just if I may just, Commissioner Talbot, you're exactly right. And what we have been discussing with the engineering and operations is there will be some customers that might be able to put their entire house and charger on one meter or one channel. We're not looking at, but we have some AMI that has multiple channels. So there's
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It would be great to just meter the car charger.
Right, and so that's part of that's part of the mechanism to do that, let the car either be its own meter potentially.
Yes.
We're in a transition period with technology, but you're
Yep.
right. We want to make sure that we explain this clearly, but if we have it metered by itself, it's a no-brainer for a EV guy to, it's a good program if we can make sure it's separately metered, which we have a mechanism to do that.
I'm not, I don't know. Now, are you gonna do a separate service or are you gonna do a separate meter? Like if you say it's separately metered, there's a whole litany of issues with that I don't want to make everyone make, oh, we'll just do the second meter. That's a little not misleading, but there's a lot more behind that statement than just throw a second meter in.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And so that's, there is cost to put that second meter in, and we do that at certain residences already. And that's part of, as you look at the rate schedule, 293, it is basically, it's got all the base customer charges, et cetera. Our intention, the way we structured it, is to allow the off-peak hour net to be as significantly as we can, less expensive on a KWH basis once they're installed. And I'm with you 100%. So we have work to work out on this, but we want to get it started and get feedback from the customers and fine tune it as we need to. Yeah. Anyway,
That sounds good to me.
That's the idea, at least.
You got to experiment.
Yep. Yep. That's good point. Any
I'm good.
Yeah, so I just had one question. So Greg, you said you'd still keep A2, right?
Yes, sir.
A2. So A2 will keep, so all right, so Dave can have his A2 and right.
Yep. But yes, we'll keep both of them for a while. We'll keep them as long. I mean, we have no plans to get rid of A2, but if the program works as well as we think, then the customers will be motivated to go to A3, but we have to fine tune it. Yes.
All right, thank you.
So Greg, this would be like a pilot rate, if you wanted to call it that.
I wouldn't, yes, you could think about it as a pilot because we're not going to have, 3,000 people signed up for it initially. It's meant to be an additional incentive for those that are on the fence about buying an electric vehicle. It's another economic driver. So you can think about it as a pilot, but we'll position it as a legitimate rate. It'll be a new real rate.
Yeah, and you could fast charge your car at night.
No, absolutely, yeah,
absolutely, yeah. It takes time. It definitely takes time. I was at Marketplace in Linfield and I saw all the people sitting there in electric cars, sitting there waiting till their cars could drive forward.
Yep.
So reality. Okay. At this point.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Phil.
Couple points. I see there were some raised hands. I assume those people want to talk. I see Dennis had his hand up. I know Marlena had it too. I mean, I would ask that you pay attention to that, please. My question is on charging stations. Will this rate be applied to charging stations?
Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, please.
So this one is a residential rate only, and it'll only be for residential installations for this particular one. We'll have a different proposal for the public chargers later.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask Greg what the marketing plan is to tell people about it, because I know when they get a new electric car, then they have communication with RMLD, and that is when you could do that. But what about existing electric car owners, and
Yeah.
also, you know, the A2 meter, a lot of people still seem to not know about that.
Yeah, so we have a list of those that have the A2 meter, so they exist. So we have a list of those that have applied for a charger rebate. I think we have I think our list is just a little bit over 250 individuals, and I think the population is a little closer to 300. So we don't have them all. But we definitely would do a marketing communications when we release that to let them know that this is going to become available. The other key piece is outbound marketing communications to the entire rate base. And then the other element, there are, in fact, you will see them on Sunday, but there are a lot of the local dealers that are coming at our request to our car show this Sunday. So we'll basically let them know as well and communicate to the dealers as well. At the end of the day, the intention is to be as broad and consistent in the communication as we can. We won't do TV ads, we don't do print ads, but with the mechanisms that we have in place right now, through the billing, through our email, constant contact piece, website, we'll be fairly aggressive with this. Again, our goal really, as you notice in the other one, is to drive as much customer awareness as we can. And we've got we've actually got Joyce on staff she's primary role is communication. So we'll be good at it. I won't say we'll be great, but we'll be good at it.
Last yes or no question. You're not losing money at 8 cents a kilowatt hour overnight, right?
No, no, we're not. We originally were toying around the idea with a nickel, but that would not, yeah, we're not losing money. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no cross subsidization going on there. Yeah, good question. Thanks.
Dennis, Phil pointed out that you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to ask Dave because he owns an. Looking at these rates, someone has a long commute, they get home, and they do a lot of driving at night too. Maybe kids driving around, everything. You'll have enough power in your car to make it through that entire night, not charge till 10 o'clock at night for an average person or someone that drives an electric car a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to add 50 at this cheap rate. You're going to add maybe, to John's point, you're going to add about 60 miles of range a night. And think about it, you probably fill your car once a week. 60 miles a day of charging is 420 miles a week. So you're doing this every night, unlike how you gas up your car. That's the cognitive thing that once you have an electric car, you realize, oh, I'm just doing this every night. I'm not going to the gas station every week anymore. So you're still getting 400 miles of charging at the cheap rate, even at trickle charging. And you can put a level 2 at 3,000 or 6,000 watts and go much more if you want to, and double up on that. I was just describing the trickle charge rate. Yeah, it's a good rate.
Okay. And then as we were discussing earlier, so this would affect someone that has a busy household that has a lot going on, that's besides charging their car, their rates would go up if they were, doing a lot electrically at night.
Yeah, or they can keep the A2 rate like we already have, which is different, but also a time of use rate.
Okay.
And that's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Somebody else might choose this because it's better for them. So I don't mean to speak for Greg, but that's what with this, and it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a good rate. Some people it'll work well.
Okay.
If you had a significant use on your car every day and you went to go plug it in, you're going to need to probably charge for 4 hours. And if you can get a non-trickle charge for 4 hours, you can dramatically increase your range, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So let's just say you cruised around, you did 60 to 80 miles a day. A third of your usually you go 300 miles. So if you want to get your batteries up to 80% per night, you'd want to plug in for at least 3 hours at a full, try to almost fully charge that car.
At a level 2 charger, you would do that. Yeah, you'd be fine with this amount of time. It's tons of time with a level 2 charger.
Yes, yes, and you need that. You need that late rate in order to do that.
Yes, and you would like to have that. Yes,
that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right, so at this point, Jason, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. I did actually have one question, Greg. The A2 rate, it's like once you go on it, you have to be on it for a minimum of a year before you can change. Is that going to be expected with this rate as well?
Yes, that is the intention. We might go back and review that, but that's how we structured it originally.
Okay.
And that would in reality, if you do this, you would most likely want to do a separate service, and then it depends on how much you drive. Payback's going to be pretty quick. I have an electric vehicle as well, and I do a little more driving. This would be motivating to me.
Okay. So Jason, I'll hand it over to the Citizens Advisory Board.
I think we've all had a chance to comment. Is there no further if there's no further discussion, I'd take a motion. If we want to vote, is everybody ready to vote, or do we want to hold off? I guess this is the first question.
I'd be ready to vote.
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. So if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, motion move that the Citizens Advisory Board recommend that the Board of Commissioners vote to accept the General Manager's recommendation to establish a new residential time of use schedule A3 rate effective on billing on or after January 1st, 2022 per the MDPU 293 rate sheet.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Vivek Soni, aye.
Dennis Kelly, aye.
Jason Small, aye. Motion passes 3-0.
If I could please ask you to read the motion.
There you go. Move that the Board of Commissioners, on the recommendation of Citizen Advisory Board, vote to accept the General Manager's recommendation to establish a time of use schedule A3 rate effective on billings on or after January 1st, 2022 per the Mass DPU 293 rate sheet.
Second.
Mr. Stempak, aye.
Ms. Pacino, aye?
Talbot, aye.
Ida, aye.
Mr. Coulter, aye. Passes 5-0. Excellent.
The biggie.
All right. Last topic. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you can please continue, Greg. Thank you.
Will do. Okay. Renewable choice, 2022. So we made a recommendation, not a formal motion recommendation, but we made a recommendation at the last meeting to have a renewable choice and a non-carbon choice. And the feedback that we heard, for simplicity, let's just have one program. And the recommendation was one program called Renewable Choice. And then underneath it, the recommendation we heard was to have a couple of options in terms of levels. So what we did based on that structure is we have drafted here the renewable choice. The intention would be, and there's a lot of detail here, so I'll walk you through it, and then we should have some discussion. And then Commissioner Vitta has some notes from the Wellesley guys as well that we want to talk about. So the intention, so very basic assumption in the upper right-hand corner. Now this is 2022, so we're basically getting things ready for 2022. That's when we make it this effective. Remember, from our annualized line, we're going to move from 23% to 26%. And when we say 26%, we're going to retire 26% of our certificates. So all the ratepayers will be participating next year, 2022, at a 26% rate. Just keep that in the back of your mind. That's what that chart is in the upper right-hand corner. And that's what that second bullet. Oops, wait a minute. Sorry, let me go back. Forgive me. So between 26% and 100, we have a 50, 75, and then obviously 100% option. That's the proposal. As we had talked about before, the rate would be 4 cents per kilowatt hour, and we'd adjust that annually. And as you guys know, the pricing for certificates varies over time. And as you also know, right, they mint over a 6-month period. So there's a lot of variability in terms of what the actual numbers work out to be. So what the structure behind this is, we would collect these funds and we would put these charges into a fund. And then on a quarterly basis, we were originally talking about doing just mass class 1, but if this becomes much more popular, we would allow us basically to take the funds and retire the next most valuable one and the next most valuable underneath that. So basically, we're trying to provide some administrative ability to actually implement this program by putting a fund in place and then retiring from the top down, from the most expensive down. So we'd start with mass class 1. We'd make it available to all rate classes. Now, remember from our previous discussions that we're working on a green choice for the large industrials, right? Those are tied to some specific wind projects. So then any rate class can participate in this. The proposal that we're recommending as staff is to have it opt-in, have it a minimum of a year. And so that's what's in the text there. And if you look at the lower left-hand corner, this would be a 2022 scenario for a typical residential account, just like we talked about last period. Typical residential account is 820 kilowatt hours, which works out to be roughly about $121 a month on average. So in this lower left-hand corner, and again, assuming we put this in place for 2022, the renewable choice, there's 3 levels there, which are basically the 100%, 75, and 50. And obviously 100%, we would be adding an additional 74% at a 4 cents per kilowatt hour rate, which would add, if somebody wanted to go full 100%, it would add $24.27 to their monthly bill of roughly $121, which would be roughly a 20% increase. If somebody wanted to be at the 75% level, they'd be adding 26 to 75 at 0.4 cents. I mean, at 4 cents per kilowatt hour, that's $16, which is a 13%. You can see from the table. And if somebody wanted to participate, but not too aggressively, they could do the 50% level, which would be $7. You can see there, $7.87, which is roughly a 6.5% increase. So that's what it would look like. The proposal that we recommend is a structure like this, based on the feedback you gave us last time. It is a program that we could actually implement, and it's probably a program that we could communicate to customers. So that's the recommendation. You can see the summary on the right-hand side. I'll pause for a minute for questions and discussion.
So Greg, can you explain
Are there any
where
comments?
the 26% is coming from again? So I'm clear on that.
Yes, Commissioner, the 26% is, so what we did with policy 30 Rev 1 is we basically said that in order to meet, so we need to adhere to the climate bill, which had a 20% target in 2020, that basically 20% of our resources needed to be non-carbon in 2020. And then it also states that it needs to be 50% in 2030. And as we talked about in the annual report, the only way that we can really claim non-carbon in this particular case is to retire the certificates. So what we're basically saying, so that's the structure. And what we concluded in order to avoid any rate shock for our rate base is to go from the 20% in 2020 to the 50% in 2030 on an annualized basis, or basically 3% per year. So in 2021, we'll end up retiring 23%. And then 2022, it'll be 26%. And every year we'll increment another 3%, so that by the time we get to 2030, we're at a 50% non-carbon compliance level. And the reason why we did that annualized line is so that there would be no rate shock for the customers. It'd be a nice, steady annual basis. So in 2022, which is what this snapshot is, that base annualized line is 26%, which means we're going to retire 26% of our certificates, sell the balance, except for this. This would actually retire more if we put this in place. And that's where the 26 comes from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it. So I have a concern with the opt-in, to be honest with you, and I don't want to steal any thunder from Marlena, but so I'll let her discuss that first. But I have a concern with the opt-in because right now we have time of use, and I look at the chart that you showed me on, I think it was slide 6, and that's an opt-in from what I understand, and that's not very well. Not a lot of people opt in, so. I have some suggestions later on as to how to maybe tweak some of this. So I just want to, state that up front here. I don't want to steal any of Marlene's thunder though, so I'll cede to her.
Mr. Chair, I'll just.
Yes, please. Yes, please, Marlena.
I don't have anything to contribute except that most recently the Wellesley board said, and general manager said they're at 94% participation rate for the program that was rolled out July 1st. And these 3 pages that are included in the packet are 1-page marketing pieces that are really easy to read and have been distributed over the last, I guess, 1 to 8 months. That's it, Phil. You can contribute all that you want. So it's a successful opt-out program so far, but it's still new. I don't know.
Okay. Vivek, I see your hand up.
Okay, yeah, I had a question about how this is being communicated. I see us saying that, if you're going from 26% to 50% or 26% to 100%, you essentially each household is effectively getting a higher rate, right? So rather than saying that the rate is only 4% or effective, but you show the value or the increased cost per household in each of these categories was a different number. That would be an easier way. Monthly residential bill is $24 or $16 or $787, and that's an effective. You're assuming that there is a certain average number of kilowatt hours, and so effectively, I'm just saying if you communicated that this would be the effective rate, that's a very simple message.
Yeah, and Vivek, the thought when we use the average. Since the majority of the bills that go to the customers is tied to kilowatt hours, and since the rate is tied to kilowatt hours, it'll go up by the 20% or 13% or 6.5% on average because it's tied directly to their usage. So
yeah, so no, because just seeing this proposed rate, that's confusing for me here. If you didn't have that, I'm fine.
Well, the proposed rate, the proposed, trying to answer the question. The way so you're right. So one way to do this is as we proposed here. This would be an optional incremental additional cost that a customer can choose to add to their bill, and it'd be tied directly to their kilowatt hours. So it'd be pretty straightforward for them to think about. Hey, my average rate's 15 cents. If I want to participate at the 100% level, it's going to be 19 cents, which will work out to be a 20% increase. So this is just to put things in a little bit of perspective. The Wellesley program, just as a comparison, they did 2 things. One is they had a program similar to this, that the new program called We Care, which is almost between $4 and $5. The one that they put in place right now that has the 94% adoption, that is basically a 4% incremental add to each one of their bills. And the opt-in is basically that 4%. And the second thing is those dollars, 85% of those dollars are earmarked for projects like solar arrays and more efficient equipment. Only 15% of those dollars are focused on retiring certificates. this program, and we can structure something like that if you want. The idea behind this program is to have it focused exclusively on certificate retirement. That's where the retire more comes into play. That's all it will be used for. And then the second element to do as best we can, and again, we can work on the communication, but to allow customers to participate at a level that they feel comfortable with. There's a whole bunch of, the Wellesley program is good in what it's structured to do, but it's relatively small. There, again, it's less than 4% increase. Their average load per residential customer is about 990 kilowatt hours, almost 1,000 kilowatt hours. So it's a little bit larger than ours in terms of the average household consumption.
Yeah, and so Greg, I was just reacting to the information you shared on that screen right now.
Yeah, okay.
Reacting.
All right. Yeah, we could think about a fixed charge as an alternative, but the thing about a fixed charge is that it doesn't reflect, again, one of the things that we want to keep in mind at the very beginning of the presentation is to make sure that the charges that we put against our customers are accounted for by, they're not doing any cross subsidization inadvertently. And so that's why we thought the structure here would be tied to kilowatt hours, because then everybody would basically be charged at a rate that's tied to what they actually use. That's the intention behind a dollar, or an amount per kilowatt hour as opposed to a fixed charge. That's
Chair,
how
can I chime in?
Yeah.
I just want to add, so everybody can keep this straight. The ratcheted amount that Greg just explained, the plus 3% every year, is a fixed charge that is already above and beyond the bill. Okay, so we already essentially have a program. This is another program. The first program was we agreed to ratchet it 3% every year, fixed.
Yep.
Nobody gets a choice in that. Nobody gets to opt out. It's fixed. And not everybody has that. So it's in addition to that.
Yep.
And as Greg said, we can change it. We can create any program that addresses what we're trying to achieve here, but it would be in addition to what we've already done.
Agreed.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, please, John.
I have said this in the past. I'm going to say it just one more time. I think putting the onus on customers to opt out is really unfair to many of our customers who are unaware of the complexity of this. I think what's being proposed here is very fair to opt in for those customers who do appreciate the different choices that have been laid out, and they can make that choice. And I think it's totally appropriate. But I think to have everyone be included and then having to opt out is just patently unfair.
And Mr. Chair, I really,
would
I
put
just to say,
yeah, go ahead, please.
I think this is an excellent program, a really, really nice job. I think much simpler than the previous idea of two. Colleen made a great point that we already are committing to these 3% annual floors. That's a great goal that's going to be spread out. This is a great new program. There's only two things I would like to just, as we go forward, one is to assure that this isn't going to be used to hit those floors. We're doing those floors anyway, the 26, 29, 32, blah, blah, blah. That's, so you're nodding, which is all I need to say.
Incremental.
Number two, it down the road that we could have a buddy system, or what would it be? Sponsor your neighbor. If somebody wanted to do this, but couldn't do it financially, is there a way for people to volunteer to cover this extra piece for people's bills? I know you may not have an answer tonight, but this is something for the future. And then as we go forward and we see what the adoption rates are, we keep in mind what Marlena and Phil indicated. If we see very low participation, maybe we could think about a small piece that's an opt-out, in spite of what John said, just to take a look at it. I understand his concern, and we're not doing that tonight. And but I'm ready to vote on this. I think nice job.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Greg. Did you hear back from any of the towns that you put up in last month's report for their opt-in programs to see what their participation levels are?
I didn't I didn't go out, so no, I didn't ask about the participation levels. What I did focus on, one of the key questions you had asked before was two of the towns, Middleborough and Taunton, had a 2 cents. And what I uncovered is that they basically collect that funds and that fund, and then they retire as many certificates as that fund allows, which was a little bit different program. But I didn't ask about the opt-in. I have not done that yet. No.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Yep.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Phil.
Yeah, so my tweak that I was considering was on the lowest level there, the renewable choice of the 50% level. You know, again, I would like to see maybe that level be an opt-out. That was kind of my tweak. And then if people can opt in, so it's sort of a hybrid method here between the two. You know, to have that as an you know, the lower level as an opt-out, but the other two levels could be opt-in on that. That was kind of the tweak I was thinking. I understand Dave's point about seeing, you know, how this is rolled out and what the people who take it on, and, you know, see what the acceptance level is. You know, my question would be, you know, how long would we need to take that? You know, in 6 months, can we come back and review this again? And could we readopt at that point, or are we committed to a full year here at this point?
That's good points, Phil. I think I'm more leaning towards an opt-in personally, because I'm just looking at if we're adding a 1.4% increase already, starting January 1st, and if we added an opt 0.5, then excuse me, an opt-out. You know, we're increasing people's rates by 8%. And I think we would all be fired if we voted that in. Quite frankly, I think an 8% increase in one swoop, I think, would be way too much personally. So I like the opt-in idea, but you know, things change, right? We all have to understand that the way that we've, you know, you look at your bill, you look at everything. I mean, just look at your TV bill. You know, we always paid just one cable company, and now you cut the cord, you're streaming, and everyone's doing everything differently. So you have to manage your bill differently. Healthcare is the same. You went from HMO, HSA accounts. Now you're in an HSP, healthcare spending accounts. Everything changes, and electricity changes as well. So I think if we take more maybe conservative steps and start with an opt-in program, you know, and see how it's accepted, and then I think maybe you can make the next leap. You know, as things change and we become more electrified, and people become more aware. Maybe that's a good point to maybe switch to an opt-out program.
But how long do we have to wait, Mr. Chair? This was a question. I don't think it's been answered yet.
Yeah, I would
observe the process before we can change it.
I would almost defer to. I would think at a minimum of 6. You know, you'd have to advertise, get customers. That's several months. You know, if you started in August, maybe when the rate you're advertising, so when the rate becomes available in January, and then at least watch it for 6 months to maybe a year. I defer to Greg and Colleen what they think, but
If I may,
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
So this particular recommendation is an opt-in, and I understand the opt-out. We just talked about there's no option to the ratcheted that we're adding anyways. Next month, we're going to be going over the rate changes for the regular classes, as that's why I stated that at the beginning. We have other changes that are coming. So I would suggest that we just think about this, you know, also think about that if we had a hybrid, which is, you know, some opt in, some opt out, we do have Wendy sitting here. We do have mechanics, the logistics, and how our whole billing system works, which we all have to keep and be mindful of. I would suggest that we take more comments about anything else that you would like us to look at for programs. Like if we want to look at a Taunton one, and maybe present that next month along with the rates, because I think we've gotten a lot done tonight, and then maybe look at the overall impact, because we all want to be green, but we want to be mindful of low income and people who are maybe not can afford some of these things. And so I just think we should pause then, because this particular is an opt-in recommendation. So I don't want to change it to something I'm not recommending until I think we have more time.
So just my last comment, Mr. Chair. I mean,
Yes,
we're
please, Lou.
talking about 26% potentially. Maybe we can look at, say, we move that, the opt-in could move that number up to 30%, the opt-out. Doesn't have to be the 6.5% that's showing on this. It could be some variation of that, some variation of the theme. And I do like the idea of some sort of hybrid method here that Colleen has just talked about that she wants to go look at. So, and I would support her effort to do that.
Yeah, Colleen, so so at this point, we're going to take this off the table per that suggestion? So you can go back at the billing system and see if a hybrid is possible?
No, I think based on the comments that we're hearing, that we could tweak it a little bit more and present some other options and some hybrids to this, check and make sure that, the mechanics and billing and stuff could actually work. And also represent it with the rest of the rates that we have to do next month. We still have time again from when the budget goes in, but we want to make sure that everybody understands, okay, what would residential go up as a total? It's already going to go up again next year by 3%, right? 3% every year, all the rates are going to go up. We just, and we want to be able to communicate it properly, especially to our commercial customers who would also be affected by this.
Mr.
Yes,
Chair,
please.
I agree with Colleen. I think if there's some additional questions that need to be raised, or we need to see what the impact of some of these other alternatives are, I think we should take our time to try and answer the questions. And, I have no objection to, a hybrid approach. I just think I agree with you, Bob. I think, a very large increase is one against what our mission is in terms of, being cost competitive with everyone else. But we have to play that off, obviously, in light of, trying to do the right thing for the planet and everything. And I completely agree with that. But there are a number of people, it's easy to forget, who did lose their jobs in COVID and are coming back now. And hopefully they'll be back online within the next year, if the Delta variant doesn't throw everything upside down yet again. So I think we just need to be very mindful of that. And trying to convince someone of an opt-in versus an opt-out, I think is going to be a marketing effort no matter which way it goes. So I would suggest that we do take our time and review this yet again.
Okay.
Could I
So-
just ask that, Greg, do you want any more clarification with comments so we can make sure we can work on different concepts?
No, but I think I have input. I think your caution, and Wendy and I've talked already, the implementation of a hybrid system is not trivial to make it work, both from a just pure billing perspective, and then back to the comment that you gave us last time, not make it too complicated. And I think, as we've already shared, we already have it's not even an opt-out, it's a forced, 2023, then 26 is going to keep going up in terms of participation in this, in a retirement non-carbon program. So we'll do some analysis on it. I want to set the stage that having a hybrid is not an easy thing to pull off from a communication perspective and from a implementation perspective, but we'll look at it. We will.
I think an important key is if you need software modifications in order to support it, that'd be something in the billing system. I think that would be a game changer.
Yep, and that's part of it. And you know, I think the internal stuff, the other element is the questions that come in. You know, we have a great customer service team. Communication is not going to be trivial on an opt-in hybrid. Anyways, just we'll digest. I don't need any, I have some ideas and we'll come back. We'll try and figure out how to make it work. But I'm not, we'll work hard to make it work, but it might have some trade-offs. All I have right now.
Okay. So at this point, Jason, I don't think we're going to have a motion on this. So we'll move on to the next item of scheduling. All right. Right now, the next RMLD board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, September 23rd. Are there any objections to that date?
That's fine with me, Mr. Chair.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Fine with me.
Jason in the cab? Vivek and Dennis?
Works for me.
And 23rd works for us, for me. So.
Yep, works for me.
Okay, excellent. And the cab meeting is Mr. Stempek for coverage?
That's correct.
Okay, at 6:30. In October will be Marlena. All right. Okay, I had one procedural question. I guess maybe Phil, Jason, I believe you would adjourn first, and then we adjourn. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Yes, just as far as cab scheduling, we do, I'm going to ask Kathleen to send an email to the board to solicit for October meetings, because that would be the budget. I would have talked about tonight, but I don't think without George here, I think it'd be better to do it with Kathleen putting it out to an email to see what we have available. That makes sense to everybody.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. I think that being the case, I guess I think we'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Roll call vote. Vivek,
Vivek Soni, aye.
Dennis,
Dennis Kelly, aye.
Jason Small, aye. Motion passes 3-0. We can adjourn.
Chair, move that the Board of Commissioners adjourn the regular session.
Second,
Ms. Pacino, aye?
Mr. Stempak, aye?
Talbot, aye.
Rita, aye.
Mr. Coulter, aye. In 2 hours and 3 minutes.
Not bad for a 1 hour meeting.
Pretty good. That's pretty good.
Come on, you
I'm gonna
cannot
go
beat
turn
the
my-
old days.
yeah.
The first meeting I ever came to, it lasted 1 hour.
I'm turn my AC on. Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night.
Good night,
Appreciate
everybody.
it. Thank-
Night.
Right on.
Thanks.